As difficult times are approaching, take lots of food and keep it in a safe place. I will be very frank with you. Things have already gotten pretty crazy, but they're going to get even crazier. Global food supplies are already tightened, but they will get tighter when even the United Nations starts using the word Bible to describe the scarcity facing the world. It is a sign that it is too late. Fortunately, we're not facing shortages here in the United States in the short term, but the temporary scarcity of some items is already increasing and food prices are rising aggressively. Earlier today, my wife stopped by the grocery store to buy a few things, and particularly a piece that cost about $12 is now $20. But thanks to the Federal Reserve, this is so low that food prices will fall. The Fed seems absolutely determined to increase inflation, and this will have serious consequences in the coming periods. Right now, we have a window of opportunity before the next wave of problems arises, and I highly recommend using this window of opportunity to buy plenty of food and store it in a safe place. Some people seem to think they will be fine if they have stored enough food for a few months. Unfortunately, this is not the reality of what we are facing. The truth is that you should have enough food to feed every single person in your household for a long time, and most of you will need much more than that. Because when things get really crazy, many friends, neighbors, and extended family members who neglect to prepare will knock on your door for help. There are some people who would turn away these friends, neighbors, and extended family members, but I couldn't do that. Yes, they were flawed as they refused to prepare, but I couldn't turn them into the street. Also, if you plan to help those around you, this will make your business even bigger. In the end, there is a limit to what any of us can do. And so we will do whatever we can with what we have and leave the rest to God. The overwhelming demand we are currently witnessing in food banks across the country gives us clues as to what to expect as economic conditions deteriorate further. In Alameda County, cars line up until 7 in the morning to get some groceries from local food banks. They start lining up as early as 7 in the morning, and this will run for 6 straight hours, said Outfest. Hundreds of cars slowly snake their way through the parking lot across from the Acura dealership on Interstate 880. Folks from all walks of life, driving everything from Toyotas, BMWs, to Mercedes, all coming to get food. Folks are grateful for the charity. When I read this excerpt from a local CBS News report, it sounded almost exactly like Heidi Baker said when she saw people waiting in line to buy food. And I saw all these people, and they had beautiful cars, 4x4s, and Lexus, Mercedes, BMWs, Toyotas. There they were with fancy shiny cars, but they were standing in line. We see similar things happening on the East Coast. In fact, there was a quarter-mile streak as dawn dawned on a food bank in Queens on Saturday. The line stretched a quarter mile before the sun was barely up Saturday, snaking around corners like bread lines in 1930s. But the hungry in Queens are today's New Yorkers, left jobless by the coronavirus. Until the pandemic struck the city, La Jornada food pantry used to hand out groceries to roughly 1,000 families a week. Now the figure tops 10,000, and volunteers serve lunch every day to 1,000. Many of them kids with growling stomachs. Across the 5 boroughs, the hungry number in the hundreds of thousands, the Food Bank of New York estimates. I found it quite interesting that the New York Post compared what is happening now with breadlines from the 1930s. This is the reality of what we are dealing with, people. Many people are already in desperate need, and this perfect storm is just beginning. Things are even worse in the Richmond, Virginia area. Vehicles line up at a food bank as early as 6 hours before opening, according to a recent report. Every Friday, cars line up as early as 6 hours before the food bank on Iron Bridge Road opens the drive-through. At noon, the first 20 cars or so are allowed to park in the parking lot, where they wait another 3 hours. Once 3 p.m. hits, the operation begins with a slew of volunteers working in the warehouse to fill grocery carts with fresh fruits and vegetables, dairy products, meat, prepared foods, and non-perishable items. Can you imagine sitting in your vehicle for 6 hours waiting for a food bank to open? Some people in America have become so desperate. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, the United Nations uses the word Bible to describe famine and hunger from around the world. The following are from CNBC. Famines of biblical proportions are becoming a serious risk as the coronavirus crisis threatens to double the number of people nearing starvation, a UN body has warned. In projections released Tuesday, the UN's World Food Programme predicted that the number of people facing acute food insecurity stood to rise to 265 million by the end of this year, up from 135 million in 2019. I don't know about you, but I take this warning very seriously. In a worst-case scenario, the UN predicts that about 1/10 of the world's population will not be able to eat enough this year. Initial United Nations forecasts show that, in a worst-case scenario, about 1/10 of the world's population will not have enough to eat this year. The impact will go beyond just hunger, as millions more are also likely to experience other forms of food insecurity, including not being able to afford healthy diets, which can lead to malnutrition and obesity. Unfortunately, although we have seen a lot of crazy things happening in 2020, most Americans still are not preparing. And so when things start to unravel drastically, most of them will fall short on food and supplies very quickly. The other day, I interviewed Steve Green, and we discussed some of the reasons why the problems we had so far are just the tip of the iceberg. Much more is coming, but most people don't want to hear about it. Most Americans still want to believe that the future will be great, and so they certainly don't need to prepare for the chaotic times that approach. Most of the idea, comment, information, and criticism containing in these videos have been created by Daily News Report. Before making any important investment decision, use the information contained in these videos as a starting point for conducting your own research. If you make any investment or legal decision, it is advised to consult an expert before making this decision.